On today's show, Buddy Hield trade coming soon as the Pacers contract extension discussions with the veteran sharpshooter ultimately stall out. What's the ideal return for Buddy Hield? Possible teams that should be interested in acquiring the veteran sharpshooter. All that and more coming up right here at Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. Look, I absolutely love DoorDash. I use it all the time. Sometimes you don't want to leave your house, your apartment, whatever. Maybe you don't want to put pants on, so you just open the app, find your favorite restaurant, order your food, comes right to your doorstep, right? It's incredible. You've trusted DoorDash to deliver your favorite restaurants. Now you can get your groceries delivered too. With thousands of grocery stores to choose from, you'll get exactly what you ordered without the fuss, right? You don't have to take a trip to the grocery store, go down all the aisles. It can be frustrating sometimes, right? You can get somebody else to do it for you, get it delivered with DoorDash. You'll get the exact right stuff, substitution options, all of that. And the best part is you can get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $20 when you use code LOCKEDONNBA at checkout. Limited time offer. Terms do apply. That's 50% off up to $20 with no minimum subtotal and zero delivery fees on your very first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONNBA. Don't forget that's code LOCKEDONNBA for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. Joining us now is the host of Locked On Pacers, Tony East. You can track down wherever you listen to your podcast. And on YouTube, just search Locked On Pacers. Here on the heels of Shams Charania reporting that Buddy Hield was unable to reach a contract extension number with the Indiana Pacers, that talks kind of fell through. So, Tony, let's start there. Why did talks stall on a Buddy Hield extension?
Hey, Jackson, hard to say if there's anything specific. But funnily enough, as I sit here outside at a wedding, it seems like it's about a long-term reunion, right? Kevin Pritchard, president of basketball operations, said at the end of last season that finding the right role for Buddy Hield would be critical before finding an extension, right? Which is a complicated part of this, a contract extension. And if they couldn't find that right role, it'd be difficult for them to move forward with an extension. So we don't even have any reported details about what the offer was that Buddy Hield apparently, per Shams Charania, didn't find desirable. But I think it has to be tied both to an extension and a specific role with the Pacers. And it seems like with the writing on the wall between Bruce Brown's addition, the money he just got, as well as Benedict Mathurin potentially getting promoted to the starting five like he did for the last couple games of last season, that both potentially Buddy Hield didn't like the role the Pacers were possibly offering coming off the bench, and the money wasn't what he wanted, right? It's hard to say for sure what that offer would be, right? He's on the wrong side of 30. The Pacers are a much younger team. They only have three guys 30 or older right now, and Hield, Daniel Tyson, TJ McConnell, so it's difficult to kind of figure out exactly what that offer would have looked like, but it seems like the extension would have been a little shorter just given his current age, and it also seems like that the role could be a big factor here.
Well, we know in the past, Buddy Hield has kind of warranted maybe a first-round draft pick or something like that. So what should a Buddy Hield return ultimately look like for the Indiana Pacers?
Yeah, difficult to perfectly say, right? He's an interesting player in that his shooting is amazing. So many teams could use it. I'm sure we'll talk about that, but it's hard to say specifically which teams. And on top of that, his defense is not very good. The Pacers' defense was much worse with him on the floor in seasons past. His team defense specifically is concerning. The team has talked about him getting better on that end of the floor. So it's hard to say exactly what the return could be, especially as an expiring contract kind of player of that vein. I've kind of compared it to three recent trades in terms of how I feel the value could be, right? Christian Wood going from Houston to Dallas, late first rounder, and a bunch of salary filler. Was that one? Boban Marjanovic being the only actual other serious player in that trade. Josh Hart from the Blazers to the Knicks. There was a late first round pick in that trade, going to Portland as well, and then a bunch of other pieces in salary, and Cam Reddish was viewed as a slight positive in that trade, I think. And the other one was DeAnthony Melton going from Memphis to Philly. Same kind of deal, right? A late first, some other little pieces floating back and forth. Danny Green's salary involved there, and he was injured at the time, which changes things a little bit. But that's kind of what I feel for Buddy Hield, is like the needed salary to make it work for the Pacers, where they stay below the cap but stay above the salary floor, but also kind of a late first kind of deal. And conveniently, he would fit very well on contenders or on teams with star players that are good at creating. Well, those teams typically have picks later in the first round. So that's kind of what I think makes the most sense for the Pacers here from a value perspective.
So for sure, draft capital over another rotation piece.
Yeah, definitely draft capital to me. They have a really deep rotation as is, right? If Buddy Hield's coming off the bench, that's reflective of what they have recently added. And Already T.J. McConnell, Aaron Nesmith might not play. Jordan Nwora certainly outside the rotation. They have a bunch of bigs who won't play. So they're really full on actual pieces that will play for their team. So adding other rotation players, sure, if they're trading for an upgrade, right? If it's Hield plus other stuff for a good player, or it's a multi-team deal, right? Who knows the many permutations this could take life of, then maybe they take the better player and play them, obviously. But in terms of just what they'd be searching for, given their situation, what makes sense for them, I would think they'd pursue draft capital. They already have a lot, and they're secretly pretty well stacked to make a significant trade at some point. Adding to their draft capital would certainly help, especially because they're going to have to take back salary just as much as they're sending out in this Hield deal.
You mentioned kind of the different permutations that this could ultimately take. All 29 teams could use a shooter like Buddy Hield, but which teams do you expect to maybe become, I guess, kind of the serious, the legitimate suitors for Buddy Hield and his services, right? Because a guy that can shoot, a veteran like him, could absolutely be beneficial to pretty much every single team in the entire association, right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That is the tricky part, is figuring out the right team that makes sense, because every team could, in theory, want a shooter of his caliber, right? Second in the league in made threes last year, over 40% for his career, 42.5% from three last year. In theory, any team would want that sort of player. And what I always made the argument for the Pacers last year is people kept saying, why should he be playing on this Pacers team that's rebuilding? Well, his spacing and his shooting makes it easier for the rest of the players to do their job. And if you're a developing player, a developing team, having that extra space is still helpful and important, right? So even to me, that is helpful for any team. So it's hard to say if there's any specific squad that makes the most sense. I think in terms of his best fits in the NBA, but Tyrese Halliburton's been his best partner. Any team with a high-level creator who has the ball a lot, he's going to look really good. Think Giannis, for example. Think Luka. And two of the teams that have been reportedly interested in them are Dallas and Milwaukee, right? So those two make sense. Miami, with Jimmy's creation and passing ability, is one that's made a lot of sense. I floated that one. But really, the way I've kind of looked at it is sorting the league's teams by three-point percentage and then just going in the opposite direction, right? Toronto, terrible shooting team last year. They could really use a shooter. It would help Scotty Barnes a tremendous amount, too. That seems like a double whammy for them. The Lakers, who have long been interested in Buddy Hield, were so close to trading for him before they did the Westbrook deal. That one's always made a lot of sense to me. There's so many teams like that have really struggled to get the three-point ball to go. That makes a lot of sense. But even those building teams, Jackson, that's the part that's so interesting to me, would also make a lot of sense just because of how that spacing would help their young players develop. That helped for the Pacers a lot last year. Benedict Mathurin, for example, being one of them. Andrew Nembhard being another. So I really think any team does make sense, but contenders and teams with high-level creators and high-volume guys make the most sense.
Now, this doesn't exactly seem like a turbulent situation. It seems amicable on both sides. Is Buddy expected to play and be with the team while the Pacers kind of start out the season, or is he just sitting out?
Yeah, I certainly think so. The day that this came out from Shams Charania, funnily enough, the Pacers put out pictures of their players working out in their facility. Buddy Hield was there, right? So in Indiana, working out with his teammates, and he's behooved to play, right? He is in a contract year no matter what. So him sitting out or him being away or being, whatever, uncomfortable, to use the Sixers term in this, would be bad for him, right? He needs to be playing, he needs to be on the court, he needs to be keeping his value solid, because the quiet part of this and part of his extension, presumably, is that he might be getting his last big contract either this year or next year. So it behooves him to play well, and play with a good attitude, especially on a Pacers team like this. So I think he'll play. He loves playing, right? He only missed 2 games last year, and it's because he was sick. He's only missed 10 games in the last 5 seasons. He's really an Iron Man of the NBA. So I can't imagine him sitting out and not being a part of the Pacers and what they're doing. And it helps his value, too, which could, in theory, help the Pacers move him or help get him to the right team and help in any extension talks that he may have. So I really don't think he'll be away from the team in a way that some of these star maneuvers can happen. And I think with an extension available to him, either from the Pacers or the team he's traded to, it behooves him to be out there playing and playing well. So maybe some awkwardness with the role if he doesn't want to come off the bench. But in general, it makes a lot of sense to me that he'd be with the Pacers doing his best to play well and kind of up his value. It helps both parties in this case.
Where is Buddy Hield heading? You'll have us covered for that and more over at Locked On Pacers. Tony, thanks for stopping by Locked On NBA.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Jackson.